The writing has come fairly late in life. I never dreamed of being a writer when I was a kid, even a student, even in college. In fact, I'd been practicing law for about 3 or 4 years in the early 80s when I decided to make a stab at writing a story that I had been thinking about. And the story eventually became A Time to Kill. When I started all this, my motives were pure. I was not driven by greed or money. I had a story. I had a story that was a courtroom drama. And at the time, I was doing a lot of courtroom work. I was a very young lawyer. But I was handling a lot of court-appointed criminal cases and in trial a lot. And I knew the criminal system, and I knew a lot about it. And so I came up with a story about a murder trial, and some of it was based on personal experience, most of it was not. And I kept telling myself, I would like to be the lawyer who defended a father who murdered the 2 guys who raped his daughter. I think that'd be a fascinating case. And one thing led to another, and I was sort of consumed with this story. And one night just said, okay, I'm going to try to capture it, see what I can do with it with words, and that's what happened. It took 3 years to write it, and I was very disciplined about doing it. It was very much a hobby. By the time I finished it, I had developed this almost a daily routine of writing every day. And so when I finished it, I went to the next book, which was The Firm. And once that was written, everything started changing. So no, it was not. So I wouldn't use the word accident, but it certainly wasn't planned. I never dreamed of it. The bulk of the first 2 books, A Time to Kill and The Firm, those books are written over a 5-year period, back to back, from about 1984 to about 1989. The bulk was written at 5 o'clock in the morning. From 5 until 7 in the morning. I'd get up and go to the office that early. And again, it wasn't any fun, but it was a habit. It got to be part of the daily routine. And I remember several times being in court at 9 o'clock in the morning, really tired. Because writing takes a lot out of you. It's draining. And I would do it for an hour or 2 in the morning, and then get ready for court and go to court and be standing or waiting for a judge and be really tired. There have been some wonderful phone calls from New York. The first time, the biggest phone call yet was a truly magical moment when my agent called after a year of being turned down. He called one day in April of '88 and said, A Time to Kill is going to be published. We have a publisher for A Time to Kill. It's going to be a book. And at that point, it had been turned down by 30-something publishers. Everybody had said no to it. And he found a very small press in New York, and they wanted to buy it. And that was a huge moment. He called and said, we've sold the film rights to The Firm, to Paramount. It was totally unexpected because at that time there was no book deal. It was just in manuscript form. Yeah, those are big moments, and I don't know if you sort of get jaded or calloused to success, but it's still terribly exciting, still hard to believe. And The Firm was published 4 years ago, so it's been awfully quick. The Firm was not the first book, but it was the first book anybody read. So you're right, it is a new career. It's still in its infancy, and it still feels brand new. And something happens every day that makes me just kind of stop and try to remember where I am and what's happening. When A Time to Kill was published, it was an unknown author, unknown book, unknown publisher. There was no money for promotion, and so I tried to sell the book myself. And I went to a lot of bookstores in the Memphis, Mid-South area, And a lot of them had no time, you know, they didn't want a new author, and especially one with a publisher they'd never heard of. But there were a handful who opened their doors and said, you know, sure, come on in, we'll try to sell some books, and we'll have a party, and we'll invite all of our customers. And, you know, it's hard to forget people like that. And it's fun now. I mean, I go back every time. I've gone back with every book. There are 5 stores. I call them, they're my home stores, the ones these are friends of mine. And I can't imagine publishing a book and not going back to their stores. I mean, now the book signings last for, 10 or 12 hours, but it's still, it's still fun.
It's a little tiring.
Yeah, it's tiring, but it's only once a year. It's not like I do it every day. And there are worse things in life than signing lots of copies of your own books. I'm still gratified, and people show up and wait in line to get a book signed. It's been one book at a time. A Time to Kill was published, nobody bought it. About the time it was published, I was finished with The Firm. The Firm slowly became a bestseller when it was published. And while it was getting this attention, I was writing the next book, which was The Pelican Brief. And each book has just sort of built on the other. Then the movies came along, and the movies added a whole much heavier layer of fame and notoriety and pressure and all that, and it's just snowballs. So, but there's no way I could have sit back and predicted that, because I can't predict what's going to happen next year with the movies and the books. I mean, I don't have a feel for everything that's coming. The pressure of really sudden notoriety and success. It's good and bad. I mean, it's something you think you'd like to have, and it's something that's nice. There are a lot of rewards. The good far outweighs the bad. But you catch yourself you remember what's important to you, your friends and families, and what you enjoyed doing years before. We have 2 small children, and before, we had a life before all this happened. And even then, we call it BF, before the firm. That's how we judge time. Everything we did revolved around the kids, and it's still that way. We've sort of regrouped as a family, and we kind of stick to ourselves with a few friends. It makes you appreciate the friends you had, because now everybody wants to be friends. So it makes you deeply appreciative of the people who are truly friends. And we've stayed away from the success. We've stayed away from, we live in Mississippi now, we live in Virginia, we have, we live in both places really. But it's country living, we try to keep it simple, and we stay away from Hollywood, New York, and all that stuff. All those places where really all the attention is. My parents did not have the benefit of college. They didn't get to go to college. They were from a very rural part of the Deep South, where most of my relatives were from. College to them was always a dream. For us, it was always a requirement. We knew, because they told us we'd go to college. And they worked very hard to pay for it and to provide it for all 5 kids. And I was the first member of my family to finish college and then to get a graduate degree in law and to start practicing law. And for the family, that was a source of immense pride. To me, that's the American dream, being able to, for one generation, to keep building the dream for later generations. So all the books and movies and all that's just, I don't know how you describe that. It is success that was just simply not planned. But only in America could it happen. Because if you look at books and movies, we entertain the world. There are very few foreign authors who sell here. There are a lot of American authors who sell well around the world. There are very few foreign movies that anybody will watch here. Yet our movies and our music are watched and listened to around the world. There were a couple things that were very important in my childhood. Number one, my mother did not believe in television. We just didn't watch much of it. She just thought it was bad, and that was 30 years ago. And she did believe in books, and we were taught to read early. We were encouraged to read throughout childhood and adolescence by my mother. We moved a lot when I was a kid throughout the Deep South, and we would always go to a new town and go to the library and get our library cards and load up with books. And we spent our time reading to each other. And my mother spent a lot of time reading to us. Those, I guess, I've always had the love for books and love for literature and love of reading. I oddly never thought about writing until late in life. I had the benefit of some very good high school English teachers, one in particular, when I was a senior in high school, I was a jock, okay, I was not a student. Although I enjoyed reading, that was about it as far as academics. But she forced us to read good books, good writers, particularly good American writers. And we weren't too thrilled to do it initially, but she taught us how to do it. And through that, I discovered some of my favorite authors, particularly John Steinbeck. And once I had gone through all of Steinbeck's books, I realized that I had a wonderful experience. And I remember in high school reading a lot of Steinbeck and thinking to myself, I'd love to be able to write this clearly. Because at the same time we were having to read Faulkner, so we had Faulkner on one hand and Steinbeck on the other, and so Steinbeck looked remarkably clear compared to Faulkner. I can't say that when I'm in Mississippi, so I can say it here. Frances McGuffey. She's still teaching, and we still correspond, and she still comes to my book signings in Memphis when I'm there, and I send her an autographed copy of every book, and we're still friends, still buddies. The first book I remember that really grabbed me was a book that Miss McGuffey made us read, a book called Tortilla Flat by Steinbeck. And when I read it, I really enjoyed the book, and so I went to her and I said, I like this. And she was shocked that I would show any interest in, what she was making us do. So she said, okay, read this. I think the next one was Of Mice and Men. Excuse me. And so she sort of fed the Steinbeck books to me. When I read The Grapes of Wrath, we saved that for last. I knew that was, a very, very powerful book. And I don't know if it had anything to do with my writing style or me as a writer, because I wasn't thinking about it back then. It had a lot to do with the way I viewed humanity and the struggles of little people against big people. It was a very important book for me. To play professional baseball, like every kid, from the time I was 6 years old until I was 20. It took a long time for the dream to die. It took a long time to realize I didn't have the talent to play, which is always difficult to accept. There was a pivotal moment after 2 years of college. I grew up in a very small, close-knit Southern Baptist family where everything was off limits. So I couldn't wait to get away from college and have some fun. And I did for the first 2 years. And I regret a lot of it because my grades were in terrible shape. Never got in serious trouble except for my grades. But after 2 years of college, I realized I was going nowhere. And before my junior year in college, I said to myself, look, enough of the partying. It's time to get busy and get serious. And I decided to study accounting, which is a tough degree to get, and to take that and go to law school and become a tax lawyer. I had sort of a business background or mentality, I guess. That's what I enjoyed. And I did. At that point, I just said, okay, it's time to get serious. And I was 20 years old. And at about the same time, I said, okay, it's time to forget about playing baseball. I'd played baseball in junior college. And so it was time for that boyhood dream to go away. And at that point, I was no longer a kid. I had to give that up before I could really be happy in pursuing something else, because it had been with me for so long, and the talent simply was not there. But it happened. I can't tell you what made it happen, but it was a very real, definite moment when I said, okay, it's time to grow up. You can't plan everything. I never planned to write books. It was not something I ever thought about. I thought I'd be a lawyer for the rest of my life. It's important to have goals and to work hard for them, but life has a way of presenting opportunities that you don't really notice at first. And success a lot of times depends on whether you take a chance and try something that you hadn't planned or something new. I give commencement speeches occasionally to colleges and high schools, and I usually dwell on that, tell the students, get your education and work hard, but don't race toward the age of 22 or 23 when you're out of college and you got the credit card and you got the BMW and you want everything right then at the age of 23, because you're not going to enjoy your education. I tell kids to stay in school till they're 30 years old. Their parents hate me for it, but nobody really takes you very seriously until you're 30 anyway, and you need to spend a lot of time in school. The basics of grammar and vocabulary are very important, and you tend to take it for granted until you start trying to write. It is terribly important to read extensively. All writers I know, virtually all writers I know, are voracious readers still. And that is preparation. The more you read, the more you know. The more your imagination works, the more you read, and those are the tools of a good writer. You have to live. Nobody wants to hear. The world does not want to hear a great novel from a 21-year-old. You got to get a real job and get a real career, and you got to go to work, and you got to live, and you got to succeed and fail and suffer a little bit before you really see suffering, or see heartache and heartbreak and all that before you really have anything to write. If you got the money, it's nice to travel. Keep journals and take notes about what you're doing. You can practice writing. You can start writing now, writing stories and books or whatever you want to write. It's the discipline of it is important. All those things are important. Now, whether or not you can piece them all together and tell a wonderful story, you don't know until you try it.